We have that, right?
There we go.
Wow, you did it, and it was so fast. I'm impressed.
Now, if we
That's
could
worth
hit
the
a
price
button
of admission
Thanks.
right there, huh?
if we could hit a button that pulls in all the last conversation that we had for the last 20 minutes. That doesn't. New
Yeah,
feature.
but yeah. So, Ted, would you like to just frame the beginning of why we're here for the recording?
For the recording. So this is the call about how do we weave movements. If doesn't that mean that we have to understand each other's frameworks, and what is in the way for that? Really, that's what I'm interested in. Thinking about solutions seems to be like dreaming too big, but just sort of acknowledging that that is an issue, that we can just scratch the surface in other people's work. And how do we weave anything if that means we have to understand each other first? And how could we do that? Is there any way of scale up, or like, is this even scalable what we're doing? Because in my worst moments, I think that it's not, because we're way too slow. Because the basic human to human understanding of things is just so slow. So that's that. And right now, so then there was the idea of for the next few whatever, basically for this call, I'm guessing, to do around on, okay, how does that translate into what you do right now, into your work? How do you see that effect? Do you see it? Maybe without the assumption, do you see it, and how do you see it, and what does that look like in concrete terms? That's what we're doing right now. And let's see, is Nathan still here? Yes. So do we have Nathan? Nathan, are you around? Do you want to talk to that topic? I'm making you a sort of next/first in this iteration. Nathan does not seem to be around. How then I'll ask Leslie. How does this express itself in your work?
So the main expression is creating a Kumu map that is a common ground for the different members of the Thriving Resilient Communities Collaboratory, and using my holocompass model as a way to create common ground amongst the different organizations. I have this framework is art in motion. It's fluid. It's an integral model. I round Wilbur. So there's a pattern to it, but it's still flexible with life. And so I'm listening for what is the framework that helps our movement connect with the whole society in a way that helps us collaborate. That's the intention of this particular framework. And in some way, it needs to connect to the frameworks that help us move society along. So trying to understand the interoperability of the frameworks, I've tried to map the holocompass to the Sustainable Development Goals. That's an experiment. I'm also, let me step back and say that we first started out systems mapping in TRCC with Scott Spann, who's like a great systems mapper. But we recognized that process wasn't participatory, and we want it to be participatory. So we're starting now with a network map, and I'm crossing my fingers that people are going to appreciate the value of the network mapping enough that we will as a collective want to move into more systems mapping. So there's I brought the systems map that Scott did into this Kumu map view of the different frameworks that we have as an inspiration to do that. So that's up for me. And specifically, I'm curious, we're going to look at the map more during the collaboratory retreat in January to see if there's enough inspiration to map some more, that we should try to go for funding to do some more systems mapping within TRCC. So that's up. And I'm trying to use the frameworks as a practical exercise in comparing the work that we're doing in the grant cycle, the funding cycle that's coming up. And we're asking everybody who's got a proposal on the table or, to become part of the map. So we want to use it in a see if we can learn more about how our work connects in this funding process as a motivation, inspiration, to see what value people find in the map or not. So that's really up. And I'm nervous because I'm, inviting like 30 people at a time into this mapping process that, Ben, for one, is like, is this going to be worth it? And I'm like, I don't know, but we got to try it to find out. I hope so, but it's an experiment. He's my main beloved naysayer at this point, keeping it practical. We hope. He's like, don't you have the answers yet? Isn't this framework settled yet? All right, I'm checked.
Good. I asked Ben to speak next, so that he's awfully frozen, but maybe it's us. I'm afraid it's us.
I'm not.
Ben, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here.
You're not frozen.
No.
Well, then go ahead. I think did I say you next? It's so hard to deal with this stuff. Ben, you're on.
Okay. Yeah. So the question again is how is this challenge of translating our work showing up?
Exactly.
Okay. Well, this dialogue is certainly one crazy, messy experiment in that, right? And especially because people are coming in through all kinds of different doors. Some of us, are collaborating and have been working together for years, and some others are, not plugged in at all, or some of us are plugged into a lot of different things that are happening. Do we have, to what extent do we have a shared framework, even in terms of theories of change or critique of the current systems? I find I tend to assume alignment sort of intuitively in a lot of contexts, and it seems to work for me, and I'll get to a certain point where I might discover, oh wow, that person believes something I think is actually kind of insane, and sometimes that matters and sometimes it doesn't. If we have another context where we're working together or sharing ideas, I mean, there is sort of biological evidence that, on the one hand, Ted, you're describing sort of when we use these language, whether it's written or oral, to communicate that there's translation issues that are, I totally identify with what you're saying. Do we even mean the same things with the same words? And what are we not saying? And it's also, I think, pretty well known, right, from psychological studies, that we're learning, we're sensing and understanding things instantly. You walk into a room and you're just, it's part of our animal capacities, right? There's other ways of communicating besides language, or even that language is a of, that sound and other things are so. I think that there's systemic level versions of that too. That it's not just about when I'm in the physical presence of somebody, and we're face to face here. So I think yeah, I can't smell y'all, but I'm getting a lot of that anyway. I think I think that there may be more subtle realms. Leslie does a lot of work in that territory, at which connection is happening. It's not visible. And the things we look for to show that understanding has taken place, kind of, to some extent, they're embedded in a set of assumptions about what communication and learning looks like, and so, or what change looks like. So I'm not saying I don't agree with your concerns, Ted, that the process of doing this is so slow, and the needs we need to address are so urgent that it sometimes seems kind of hopeless. I'm not in any way. I feel that too plenty of the time, but there is I hold out some hope that there are things happening that we just aren't really very good at sensing or knowing, that there's a level of translation and coordination that just doesn't look like the things we assume it's going to look like, much the way that a fungus came from China and completely changed the forests of the entire East Coast, right? And it wasn't trees, it wasn't people, it wasn't at that scale. It was this minute thing spreading invisibly, and all of a sudden there are no more chestnut trees within a very short period of time. That was a destructive version. Well, maybe we need that. Maybe some destructive things like that are happening to the extractivist global capitalist systems and rigid organizational structures that need to go away. And we can't really tell until that progresses to a certain point, and then we can look back and say, oh, well, that was obvious in retrospect. Similarly, what replaces those structures, takes hard to know until they're kind of more fully formed. That'll be it for me.
Nice spot in the round, I think. I mean, there's tons of both ends here, because I completely agree with you, Ben. And I guess one little anecdote that illustrates that is that I recently had somebody contact me about sociocracy and saying, like, to be honest, I don't even understand quite yet what it is, but I already know I belong here. And I think he was sort of tapping in, he was sort of using his other senses. But then there are also people to whom, with whom you have to talk for like hours so they even see the need for a governance system different. Like they are like very, very intellectually, completely driven, and it just takes a long time. While some people just go like, oh, this feels relevant. I think this is good. Let me follow this train. So yes, both I think happens. And I guess I'm mystified by the people who sense their way into things, and I'm frustrated with the people who take a long time to sort of see the need for that. Is a no-brainer in my view. And I know, 90% of that is my own impatience, and I'm aware of that. I'm known to be impatient. One thing that strikes me, I don't know, maybe I'm totally stating something obvious, but a little learning from myself right now, sort of the different strategies, right? There's the networking, like these kind of conversations. Then there is the mapping, that's another strategy, right? Of sort of how do we gain connection between things. And one thing that's where my mind goes is the third strategy is the meta language, right? It's the finding terms that will describe all the frameworks, and that's hard because you go even more into that linguistic realm of things. The reason I bring that up is because how it specifically shows in my work is that, as everybody in the room is aware, there's holacracy, there's sociocracy, there's different forms of sociocracy, there's different rumors about different forms of sociocracy, and all of the crazy fermentation that just that happens. And to me, that's just plain crazy, because there's so much energy wasted by all of that. And it's not even egos are in play too, but that's not even my point, because I don't think they will go away. But what it is for me is the like, oh my God, it just takes so much effort to understand the difference between, say, aristocracy and holacracy. And then it takes so much effort to really understand how there's hardly any difference. And then it takes so much effort to actually, like all of that, it's like, that's where I struggle. And that is something that affects me all the time, right? Because people sort of want to that difference, or how does this translate into that? It's like, well, okay, like you sort of, it's always this mental gymnastics. And I know one trail that I'm on right now, I'm just gonna float that here, is that I had this. I'm a linguist. I don't know if I said that here. I'm a linguist. I wrote my dissertation in syntax semantics interface topic. So pattern language, basically, in pattern language and how it fills with meaning. That's the sweet spot for me. And I had this grandiose idea of writing a universal grammar for governance models, basically to have the language to describe how sociocracy and holacracy are different, okay? And all of them. I mean, obviously it would have to affect them all, but it has to be good enough to describe that difference in a precise way. And then I learned just a few weeks ago that Eleanor Ostrom wrote an institutional grammar that looks, I just skimmed it, because I don't get around to doing those things right now. She basically did that, like an institutional grammar. I'm like, whoa, that is cool, because that's, talking about geeky and nerdy Leslie, that is where I get excited, and I want to just take a year off and just dive in into just that. Institutional grammar sounds terrific to me. That's exciting, but it's so endlessly geeky. But anyway, I'll look at that and see what can be done with that. That's hopefully my fun project for 2019. And I'm complete, and it's your turn.
Thank you. So for me, it's actually like being in a funny position right now as well, because it's a little bit like an experiment for me, because it's like the first time that I'm on a Zoom call like this. And it feels like actually like what you're discussing here is kind of like what I'm experiencing right now. So like the Zoom call is like a small window for me for a lot of different realities for you that you have in your mind when you talk about these things. And I'm trying to understand what these concepts mean for every one of you. So like, for example, myself, I think I struggle already like understanding what a framework is for you. And that's why I think like what you said, Ted, I would definitely copy that. That, I don't know in what way you said it, like maybe I said it in my words what I mean. I think it's dangerous actually to like stay in that meta level. I think it's more important to go like down one level to connect it again, because like people have so different understandings of the concepts and the words they're using. And I think for the translation, it's more about understanding people's experience with these frameworks and different concepts, and like more the emotions side of it, to understand like the realities of the people. So I think like, so in our organization where I'm working, it's very much project based, and we work very independently, but we're like kind of like part of one bigger organization, which is quite big, with like I think 20,000 people in 130 countries around the world. So the connection and understanding each other is very difficult, and I think we have like a common set of language, but what it means in our daily work is quite different, and how our day evolves, and what kind of like are the success factors for our work, what are the challenges we face. I think to understand that of each other is only possible if you like have like some case studies and some very specific examples, because I think we like easily understand each other if we use the same words, but maybe there are like a lot of misunderstandings which we don't even notice while doing that. So that's just my input for now, with like what I got from this conversation so far.
Sorry, I'm taking a while to go to the chat, and I said Kiana next.
Great.
Random
Great.
order.
Good round. It's a great round. So in this round, I guess I'll acknowledge the pattern language background that I also have. That's been a key focus for me, and I also have been taking some notes in the doc and dropped some of those strategy pieces in the action steps just in case we come back around to this and we want to approach it that way. So the institutional grammar is in there in the meta language project. But I love the realm of being able to move between levels. Philip, like you were just talking about, not getting kind of caught up in the framework, and that to me is the piece around the living systems approach that I felt Ben was referring to as well, like being able to collect information on the subtle level or from outside and be adaptive. So there's like a resilience to the frameworks and how they can interoperate. And so I'm excited about the Kumu map being one of the places to play with that, since Leslie, you've already been doing that. And so the two people that I've been working the most with around Kumu maps or mapping in these projects is Christina and also Sophia. And so Jeannie and the Jeannie project, which is also connected to Culture Seed, which is our nonprofit in the Gorge. So I'm sensing into how this can all keep staying connected with some of the ongoing sense making for the grounding it in the communities side also, and the local groups, but then having it be Sophia Gallagher, and she's in Atlanta. She's doing some great work there, and she actually came to the Regenerative Collab, which the Jenna Alliance hosted at Arcosanti this fall, and during the event, with Christina's support, she, as her mentor on that, she did the map for that event. So we, during the event, had a forum, collected the data, and then on the last day of the gathering, presented it to everyone to show a bit of that. Though it's part of that realm is also about understanding what are the data sets that we really want to focus on the most, and how those, how that sense making, like what are we focusing on, and that's in the warm data sort of strategy in its own way. So this piece about the translation from different frameworks, I think in a big way to, for myself anyway, what I'm getting in this is the living systems approach, keeping it adaptive, resilient, and kind of agile or sort of intentionally ready to be understood in a different way. I've done a bit of the pulling together other pattern languages that are out there from other folks, and at times have been, I've recently, coming out of the collab, had the intention or the desire to create a pattern language that was focused on the movement itself. And so how to have, this could be related to the institutional grammar, especially though the pattern language for living systems in organizations, or, because that's the work we're doing at Village Lab as well, and the project of the Jenna Alliance is that it's not actually an organization, similar to the TRCC in that way, as an aspect of, it's a collaborative ecosystem of organizations. So there's space for interorganizational collaboration, yet we are trying not to have it become, in this case, in the case of the Jenna Alliance, we're trying not to have it become another legal entity or organization of its own necessarily, because it's an organism more than an organization. And the pattern, though, that we want to be able to establish is how to apply those patterns for commonsing and wealth sharing and common sense making across different membranes of all different scales, to have that pattern language be available and a living system pattern language for organizing or organization, or then the words fail if I'm trying to say use living words for organizations in the current language, but that's part of the bridging that I'm seeing. And I'll stop there.
Nathan, I'm not sure how much you're here. Are you here? Calling Nathan.
Hey, sorry. Okay.
Yes.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, and your face.
Woohoo! I'm getting Christmas gifts ready and behind them. I have to pack for a flight tomorrow. Um, but yeah, I'm listening. I love it. Leslie, I'm echoing the call to see your maps and the link to the holocompass. Oh, I saw you just posted it. Nice, cool. I can't wait to check that out. Man, yeah, I agree with all these points that yeah, it's really important to have these maps and have this mutual understanding and man, yeah, it's a problem that's so important to solve, and I also like resonate with this like really visceral contentment of being with people who share similar concerns and who want to look at this whole thing at a meta level and make it more efficient and make it more effective and increase collaboration and cohesiveness. And so, yeah, so happy to be here. I'm sorry for being just more of an observer this time, but yeah, thanks.
So I propose that we just do the same order, just starting again and sort of shorted, what I call, I once coined that and somebody asked me whether it was a thing. Leftover round. Basically, it's just like, okay, what else, was stirred up that you would like to say? It's not a thing. It's just something I made up. Leftover round.
Now it is a thing.
Now it is a thing, I know. That was my strategy. I have no idea. I can't see the chat, but you see the chat. Whoever was first, go ahead. Or was it Leslie? Leslie's not moving. That makes me nervous. Now I am looking it up.
No, I'm here. There's.
Are you first?
Well,
Did you see
Ben
that?
was first in the. Oh no, Leslie was first in the order because she didn't get added. She was talking when you added the list.
Right. So yes. See, I was quoting from memory, and it was right. So yes. So Leslie, and then the order as stated in the chat.
Leftover. I love it. I just feel kind of buoyed up with the framework community, being part of a stronger framework community, and encouraged to keep going with this Kumu experiment because it's been challenging. It's hard to try to make sense and find a meta pattern language, and I appreciate wanting to not stay abstract but be able to land it, as I call it, on the ground in practical ways where people can find it useful. I love Scott Span's experience of the mapping process leading to consensus among 150 organizations on their strategy. I don't know if that's possible in what we're doing because it's even more systemic than what they were trying to do in REAMP of lower greenhouse gases in a particular region. We've got a broader perspective than that, but I'm convinced that there's some sense making that's going to be useful. I had another thought, but I lost it, so I'll say thank you.
It's me. Yes. Okay. I assume people can hear me.
The
Yeah?
reason we're quiet is because we're waiting. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm on this little tablet. I don't usually use it for Zoom, so it's.
That's why I'm so slow too. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, leftover round. I like that. I think there's a connection with some of what's coming up in conversations around other conversations around collaboration and it's not scale, it's approaches to collaboration. So uh, on the one you have like on the one hand you have a collective impact type framework, right? That as a backbone organization and it's well funded and it's doing all this coordinating and communicating. It's the translator, if you will, right? And the theory is you got to have a translator, and it can't be the biggest organization in the collaboration because they'll distort everything through their lens. So it's sort of a neutral space, function in the system to do that. And I guess those approaches have they've gotten a lot of funding. I'm a part of one, the Food Solutions New England, and I really like it, and I'm impressed with all the stuff that's going on. And from the very first time that I learned about that framework, I was kind of skeptical about it. It just felt very, very demanding and heavy, and also this very the whole metaphor of a backbone, right? We're back to biological metaphors, seem very centralized, even if they're not. If their goal is to be more communications than sort of top down coordinating and strategizing. So, and I think that's if you're operating that way, then the challenges you're naming are showing up, and you need to create those kinds of structures to address them. And is there a whole other way of operating that is actually going on all the time, but less visible? Kind of back to what I was saying before. But maybe there are ways that we can intentionally create those. And I've been searching for metaphors, like somebody else just said, an organism versus an organization in a different piece of work I'm doing. It's funny to hear that again. But an organism still feels too centralized. I think it's more like soil, that this soil exists in which we're all operating, and how do we bring more life to the soil, perhaps, or the microbiome in general? And then we got fungi and other things and stuff blowing in the wind and things in and on our organizational bodies also, right? That are doing all kinds of stuff. And I kind of think that's where the new paradigm, if it's going to really emerge, is going to come from. That if we're trying to operate structure to structure, we're in the context of the old paradigm, and we can reform things that way. But I don't think we'll create real transformation. And complete.
Going back again. This is so cumbersome. It's me. Our the counterpart, well, we call it Mission Circle, doesn't matter, it's our board. They we sort of did some mapping project to situate ourselves in the movement, sort of who's left, who's right, with some of the people we're connected, and sort of to identify who we're not connected to, we should be connected with in terms of movements. And one of our board members, I'm going to connect to Leslie. She already knows that, Lorraine, because she's Mrs. Framework in my view. So that seems like a good idea, and that's that's where that conversation lives in our organization. So that's cool. I'm excited about that. I wrote it down for myself. We did our own mapping. And then there's Kumu, which I'm excited to hear about, although I'm sure I've heard about it before, but it just takes a few times till it sort of reaches that threshold, right? And I was thinking, one should map all the mapping efforts, so we know where they happen. Oh, well. I like the idea of the soil a lot. That actually speaks more to me than the other metaphors, I think. What's in it for me is sort of where am I going with this? Something like, a healthy soil will have a balance that whatever grows in it will be healthy, because I'm always cautious when we just build infrastructure. It's infrastructure for anything, it's like democracy is inherently good. Like, well, like, I don't know, the Nazis got into power legally, so it's like, how self-regulating are those things? I'm always very skeptical about that. And so anyway, soil works for me if it's sort of, you know, there's also the it's more, it has to be more than scaffolding. There is some value infusion in there. That's something I see. Other than that, I'm complete, and it's your turn.
I only have like few leftovers. So I like that we like talk about the different metaphors, because I think that connects well to what I tried to express earlier. And I think having a discussion, mapping frameworks, using different analogies and metaphors, I think that is really helpful, because you create actually images where people have like similar connotations. So I think that's a good way to go. And I'd be curious to hear more about other metaphors you're using and think make sense. That's about it, actually, from my side.
All right. So the next, yeah, I like the idea of leftover around. Although for me, I'm finding this whole idea of like, well, you know, you can take the leftovers and then add a lot of other things and make like something new. So kind of we're hinting towards that action step, kind of like exciting next directions. So I'm noticing that Nora Bateson is coming to mind in relation to the complex systems interacting living systems approach to this. And Ben, I appreciated that you know, the clarity around organism scale is smaller, but if like an organization has a defined membrane, or saying like, this is our organization, it can function more as an organism, which might have multiple organs in it and be that level of complexity, yet it's still in an ecosystem, which is a more complex, adaptive, broader system, and those different scales. And so in Village Lab and the participatory commons model that Jeff Clearwater and I have been developing, that the Gen Alliance is using as a evolving use case, is a collaborative ecosystem or a participatory commons. That's kind of the model that we're using to bridge that living system example into interrelationships in a lot of organizations. But I think that like semathesy, the mutual learning, that was the Nora Bateson word for mutual learning, which is like a defined aspect. And I think if we apply that to the frameworks approach, and that the frameworks can learn from each other, and so then almost in a way tying through on my point about the living systems piece, to have, if the framework is too rigid, that's kind of like feedback that we might want to adapt that framework almost in a way. That might be the feedback for that, and that still continuing to see the usefulness of how everything that is there exists, and being able to make transitions and break rules that are, if they're not, you know, I like to think of governance, actually, when I talk about governance, if I'm teaching permaculture or when I'm sharing, you know, if I'm helping to share governance systems, I think of it the same way as if we were to look at climate as our governance, right? If we look at the governance is more of like the context that we're in from the broadest level. So that I like as a strategy around that. So the seasons are governing us, the weather, and then at these different scales, and how we interact in the natural world in that kind of way. And then when we apply strategies like that to have governance less as something that ends up being kind of an oppressive thing, and more of it just being conditions. But anyway, that started to turn into me just running on. I didn't mean to go that long, because I think our session was scheduled to end here. But grateful to be here and looking forward to the ongoing conversations and being part of the framework community, emerging out of this, out of these dialogues. So thank you. Soil.
That's the one word summary of this call. Nathan, are you around? Earth to Nathan. Yeah. Yay. This is just, you can say something. You don't have to. If you want to say something, it would be now.
Cool. I want to say thank you for hosting this, and for all of you for participating and sharing, and yeah, being in this. It's a blessing to meet kindred spirits. Yeah, thank you.
So,
I'm going to jump back to the other call. It's just got another 20 minutes or so. See if I can contribute there.
Same here, but
I'll
thank
jump
you
to
so
the
much for
I think.
this.
Yeah, let's start too.
Soil.
Thanks a lot.
I'll know how to find the harvest document, the harvest form to share dual
And
conversation.
I'll just submit it saying soil, and that will complete the persona.
There's
Harvest and soil.
a
Now the
Genesis
metaphors
song.
trip me up.
The Genesis song, Supper's Ready.
Soil.
There's a line in there. The soil, the soil, the soil. It's just kind of random in the middle of the song. It's something's deep in the soil. I forget. I'll have to add it to our playlist. I don't know. I've already hit my limit of 3 songs. Thank you all.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you too.
Bye.
Solstice.
If you do it well, is to not have to parent anymore. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, thank you for that. And some of the just also came up with this mother metaphor. It's like mothering finalists, not really. Yeah, because like trying to give all of them resources they need to the best of their ability, instead of just trying to select one and say that everybody is trash, everybody else is trash, it's just one is the best. Yeah.
yeah, because that's like Sophie's choice. Like, which child do you choose? instead of nurturing all your children and deciding which one needs the best. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so yeah, thank you so much. These are very great reflections. Yeah, I wonder if there is anything, because I know that the time is running out of the call as well, and if there are any thoughts or ways that you have about your work that you are doing with in your places, that you may because you know it's super cool to have your support and reflection, and I'd be happy to continue this conversation if you're interested in that. And but I'm also wondering if this conversation can make some sense for the work that you are doing, each of you on this call, and if you can take something away from and like reflect on something, or if you have any specific ideas about you know, connecting your work to some of the things that I mentioned, that if you want to reflect on that, that would be super cool, but you don't have to. But again, I'm just curious if you can like shift your attention from the challenge itself back to your work and see what may it evolve from you. And if you want to share something, please do. Yeah.
So
you know.
So what we are trying to do with the virtual community of practice, which is local to global, is actually support people developing a place-based initiatives. That's part of this transition town and permaculture thinking. And I see challenge as a very good model for doing something similar, maybe in collaboration with you, because we also have this problem. We cannot find boxes where to put ourselves when we are talking with institutions and funders. So we normally don't fit their frames, and that's because I guess it's not laser focus, it's systemic. approach.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And now that Leslie and Ben are here, I would be also curious to hear a little bit about how it looks
but
TRCCs.
one moment. Nina, just before we do that, if we could hear from Deborah if she wants to share something, and then Lauren, and then we go to Ben and Leslie. Would that be okay?
Of course.
Sure. So, yeah.
I guess I don't really have any project per se that I would connect with the prize. I'm more as like an individual storyteller, really.
Yeah, but your article is a project, at least.
It is a project, and it's stemmed out of a book that I'm trying to get out there. So I still have a bigger story that I need to get out into the world. And Hanley, who's just dropped off, has inspired me to keep going. But I talked with Colin the other day in the GCC. He wants to do mapping, and I saw the list in your article and the list that I put at the end of my article. So the idea that's coming to me right now that is related to what you've just been talking about, but also not, is and I think Leslie's talking about this too with the thriving resilient communities, is how do we map? Is creating maps that all of us can get to, so we can see what NetArt is doing, and Lauren, and
navigate,
and find where resilience and systemic system changers are starting to evolve anywhere on the planet, and give each other support, and finding a way to see it visually, as well as to go through databases or whatever. So maybe like artists, but Colin has this ability to do mapping, and why not make like a consciousness map of emerging new systems? So that's kind of where my thinking is right now.
Beautiful. Yeah, and again, my the reason why I wrote this article is that one is because Kevin Jones asked me to, and second is that I resonated with that a lot, because I think that none of us can actually map the whole field, because we all are in our bubbles, however beautiful and big they are. And we don't have to. And also mapping, it's okay to have an approach that is centered on us, because we're conditioned to have this objectivity. Right? Oh, no, I have to be absolutely not centered in my work. I need to like map the field as it is. It's impossible. That's fine. Just accept it. Just name it as it is. It's my bubble. It's my work, my perspective. I'm ranking these initiatives based on their relevance to me, and that's okay. And if many people do that, we have balance. So anyway, I'm very curious to see what you have. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Deborah, and thank you so much for your beautiful reflections and the linguistic contributions, I would say, with transformers and everything. So we'll keep thinking about that. Thank you so much, and look forward to reading your article as well. And Lauren, I wonder if you want to say something, especially in the context of your relationship with others' work, but maybe just different work you're doing.
So what I'm trying to do is to find people who, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to find people who have already kind of developed commons governance stuff, so we can try to start putting stuff together to kind of like reform the investment climate, mm-hmm. Because the problem that I'm seeing is that the important infrastructure projects we need for this field, it's very hard to explain them to any kind of investor. Like these kind of these mapping projects, like what you need to make them work, mm-hmm. No normal person can understand. And the thinking is so different. So
mm-hmm.
what I'm trying to do is to create like a new entity, like a smart network, like to create some kind of buzzwords and environment that like is actually attractive, mm-hmm. that makes it that and much easier to understand and try to get people to fund systems work. It just doesn't. In my talks to venture capital, they're just like, I don't even understand anything that you're doing at all. So trying to work together with investors to kind of create a new entity that sounds like friendly. Let they invest in this environment. There's going to be amazing, innovative things of the future coming out of it, and kind of like rethinking how more attractive of just this kind of like kind of nonprofit. Like I just want to see like how can we create abundance and kind of like a energy that this is where the amazing things are happening of the future that you have to invest in, or else, you know, you'll be left out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, this is I think this is a very important piece of the puzzle. Yeah, and this is yeah, and you know, this is what the field TRC is playing in, not necessarily with impact investors, but with philanthropy. Are you familiar with the work of Jed Emerson, The Purpose of Capital? We're writing an article for Stanford Social Innovation Review on the blend of his work and our work with leadership development for that, and the challenge, and our colleagues from Melbourne, the reorganizing business models, the systemic business models.
Can you write his name?
Yeah, Jed is G-E-D and Emerson, E-M-E-R-S-O-N. The Purpose of Capital. And I think and there is also his talk at the Commonwealth Club that we live streamed through the Impact Journey page, Impact Journey Creating the Future page. So if you remind me, if you just send me a message, I'll tag you under that video. So because he's talking exactly about what you're talking about, and he's been you know, in that field for maybe 30 years, I think, or something. And so he's very much, he knows the language, and he knows, you know, how to engage and things like that. So he's doing some very deep advocacy on the frontier, I think, of capital, and he's taking seriously. There is in the Stanford Social Innovation Review article written by somebody from the old school, and it's to many of us absolutely horrible, because it encourages all the bad things and it encourages all the good things from our perspective. And Jed is very gently commenting on that article and challenging some of the assumptions. And the author is very respectful, and she knows him. And you know, there is a kind of certain kind of power behind him as he engages even the kind of most adamant capitalists in the social impact impact investing field. So anyway, I just thought it might be interesting for you to get familiar with his work and maybe himself, and you know, might be a good ally in what you're doing. And this is very connected to the Evolution Future Challenge as well, because again, we need support structure, and part of it is recognition, part of it is mentorship, and part of it is capital. And you know, TRCC, that's why I was curious about, you know, collaboration, especially with the TRCC and collaboration with Jed and others, because we're all doing the same thing, but from different angles. Again, we're not directly concerned with philanthropy. TRCC is concerned with philanthropy, so some of the finalists might be interested in becoming TRCC members, for example. And we're not concerned with impact investing, but we would love people who are aligned to be looking at our finalists, things like that, right? And again, just the reason why we're like trying to bring expertise from academia about studying like these enterprises that are doing systemic work on the ground, plus Jed, who is working with capital, plus us, who are kind of integrating the whole thing and bringing these larger principles of this work into the picture. I think, and putting this article in an outlet that is considered the cornerstone of traditional social innovation from these power institutions like Stanford Social Innovation Review. But Shareable is great, and Shareable understands what we're doing. Center for Social Innovation, we might not necessarily understand what we're doing. So we need to kind of change the discourse there, not just at Shareable. And that is part of what we're doing with the challenge as well. So we're trying to see all these different pieces of work that contribute to creating the structure, and use challenge as a plan, and also tap into other change efforts and collaborate with other change efforts that are kind of moving the cutting edge, like the frontier of complementary pieces of the field. And I think I got his Facebook message, so thank you so much. I'll follow up on that. Perfect. Unless there are some burning comments from Deborah or Nina, then Ben and Leslie, I don't know for how long you have been here, probably not for so long. Any reflections that you might share, or any questions you have, or anything, just reactions?
This is Leslie. I'm going to hop in and say I'm really excited to hear that, we're all trying to do the same thing, basically. I want to just, share the perspective that TRCC has been funding not just nonprofits, not just through philanthropy, but a lot of the projects we've been doing are also co-ops that are taking impact investment. And I have been trying to figure out for years how to bring the impact investors into the conversation too, and to
well, that's great to know.
Yeah, and I know a lot of impact investors and have been trying to do that, and we have a strategy circle right now that's centered in Silicon Valley. It's time to finally shift what we're doing into a more of a startup model. And so I've been imagining shifting this whole co-project initiative into something that is more impact investor, kind of mainstream friendly, in terms of a challenge with tiers of and then that's another dialogue too. It's like we're ready to move into something that's developing. The language that I used in the Talanoa report to the UN is we're developing private, public, people partnerships and challenges to do that. And I would love everybody to put the links to things in here, because this is really up. Anybody who would like to join us in the strategy circle we'd love that. Shareable's in it. And
count us in, at least like from the institute and me.
Yeah. And so Fyodor, really I would love to work with you more on seeing what we can do to collaborate, synergize on the challenge, because I think that the whole language of challenge is something that happens on an annual cycle, that is place-based, that is, brings people together, and there's prizes and awards. Oh, the other thing I wanted to say is we have already developed a practice in the co-project initiative where essentially everybody who gets an RFP pretty much gets some kind of funding, like a baseline level of funding. It's part of being a healthy ecosystem. So we're already well beyond the traditional philanthropic model, and we want to, continue to evolve it that way.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like TRCC is the example that comes out of my mouth every time somebody is saying, "Oh, the funding system is so screwed." I say, "TRCC, look at TRCC, look at what they're doing."
It's a challenge to be outside this box. So being appreciated feels really good, especially while we're struggling with the nitty gritty of the the new architecture. It's like, how do we do this? How do we do that? And how do we shift it to be soil-based, as Ben's favorite analogy is? How do we operate like mycelia? As I'll turn it over to Ben. Thanks so much.
So beautiful. Thank you so much. Count me in that strategy circle, and let me know if I need to do any formal sign up or something.
And Lauren,
happy to
anybody.
Lauren said.
Of course. Yeah.
Did you get that, Leslie? Lauren as well as Peter. Well, it's funny you were just talking about the challenge, the internal challenges of the process, Leslie, and we're down in the weeds of it, and hearing the complaints from people about, like inevitably the timeline gets more compressed for doing all the things that we want to do, and the whole process is complicated and it's time consuming. So on the one hand, we're innovating something. On the other hand, from the outside, you can look at it and you can tell people about this and say, see, something else is possible. I think we're still figuring out how, what's the most vital essence of what we're doing, and how to make it, is the job to make it more lightweight, or is it, is it something else? Is it to just give ourselves more time to do the scope of work we're asking people to do if they're part of the process, and maybe more of a stipend for being a part of it? Or maybe if the grants are bigger, then it's worth putting that in, and that shifts things too. Which leads me, I think, to the other thing. I mean, my fear is that these challenges are serious. And I think people could be burning out on it, that if see how this cycle goes, but if we can't get, if we don't have more money in the pool, or a lighter weight process, or, I don't know, that, maybe what we've done is we've prototyped something, but the way that this scales out, rather than up, is not in this form. So these are big questions, and I think for this year, one of the places to focus is more money in the pool. We're very dependent on the Threshold Foundation right now. We have a model that doesn't need that to be the case at all. And each year we've had at least 2 other contributors to the pool, but they're maybe 10, 15% of the total funding. And so if we could, and we're coming into the window right now. As soon as we get our nomination, our proposal docket in place, or even just as we're getting to that point when we know which organizations are getting requests for proposal and moving into them when we have the actual set of proposals. But we can be starting the conversations when we have that initial list, which will be the end of January, with prospective funders, and even talking to them now, but we'll have more to show them, I think, then. And we're talking, even $5,000-$10,000 could make a difference if we got a few of those, just in terms of what we're modeling too. But if we found some funders that wanted to contribute more, I think that would be exciting. And and also, to your point, Fyodor, of philanthropy is only one domain. Bye, Lauren. See, you're saying you have to go.
Yeah.
And most of the money in the world is not in that domain. So Leslie's been talking about, how we bridge these. Kevin Jones talks about, he's not in the philanthropy, but he and I have had some conversations about, capital stacks, that there's lots of models out there for how you blend, do blended capital. But we haven't explored that yet. But I think some of the groups we're working with are exploring it. The Working World is a good example, and some of the initiatives that are within their framework that we've had more direct contact with. So those are just some things to name.
Thank you. And this reminded me, like an obvious thing that I didn't think about. There is this interesting person who used to work at, Leslie, you might be familiar with them, Silicon Valley Community Foundation. Do you know them? So interesting organization. He is as far as I understand, he is personally very invested in figuring out how to do things differently.
Really?
And I mean, he doesn't work for them anymore. he used to work for them. And I'll talk with him as maybe I can add him with you, because I mean he is super good in fundraising.
Awesome. That would be great.
Let's see.
I used to run our local community foundation, the Loma Prieta Community Foundation, and I'm convinced that community foundations are, crucial funding vehicles for the places. I know that from the inside, but the infrastructures are just nuts and hidebound with targeted funds. So there is a group I know the RSF has helped to organize of more progressive community foundations, but I don't think Silicon Valley is one of them. So yeah.
Okay, yeah, but I think that might be some synergies. So I mean, if you want, I can just send an email introduction and see if
that'd be great.
Sure.
Awesome.
Okay, great. So I want to be mindful of the time. It's 10:03 already in California. So maybe we can do like a formal checkout with maybe 1 word to 1 sentence about either how you feel about the conversation or what you're taking away, and please keep it like 1 word to 1 sentence. And I'll be happy to continue this conversation with you all outside of this call structure. So feel free to reach out at any time. And thank you so much for being here and so for all your contributions. And let's take this time to check out from 1 word to 1 sentence how you feel or what you're taking away.
I'll just say grateful.
Thank you.
Grateful and empowered. And game on.
Thank you.
Well, I'm still curious. And I'm also curious what Deborah was drawing.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you, Nina.
That's my word too.
Curious is your word. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so my word. You want to say something?
I say also hungry. I've been
hungry. Okay.
on the phone for 4 hours straight and didn't have much to eat before I started. So.
Yeah. So my word is aligned, and it's really good to feel aligned, and also, yeah, learning. Yeah, I think these are 2 words, and I want to bring Tahena back in the conversation, because Tahena had to leave early, but she had amazingly beautiful contributions in the first part of the call. And also maybe even Leslie and Ben reaching out to her to see if she would like to be a part of the strategic circle you were talking about.
It's Tahera with an R, by the way. Tahera.
Tahera.
Yeah, it's
sorry. Yep.
It's Dahera.
Tahera, yeah.
Tahera.
And sort of no emphasis, like all syllables kind of get equal emphasis.
Dahera, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But she used to know what pronouncing her name properly, so.
Yeah, absolutely. I try to be mindful of that, but I need somebody to correct me a couple of times before I actually grasp it. So thank you so much, everybody, and look forward to continuing that, or talk about your work in the future. And thank you so much.
Thank you for hosting, Fyodor. Have a great day. Happy holidays, everybody.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.